the first impression I had for the book would be the figure of Will Ryder, the physical impression of it. And I think the idea came several years before I started writing the book. My wife and I were on a trip to Cambodia. We were making a tour of the ruins, and we came across a girl, maybe 12 or 13, who was begging, and her face was horribly disfigured. And I noticed that most people would avoid her, enter the ruins from another entrance. So I went up, I was just intrigued by it. I was also very sympathetic, gave her some money, and what I noticed was she didn't look at me, she didn't say anything, she just cast her eyes down. And I just thought, beyond my sympathy, she must be a very, very repressed and downtrodden person, having a lot to do with her physical appearance. So a couple years later, when I began to write Will Ryder, I'm sure that I processed that image of that girl, and it became Will Ryder instead of the girl, but that was a strong start to the book. The other two impetuses to make this book, or to what I wanted to include in the book, was number two, was something about the art world. I wanted to do a deep immersion as possible into the contemporary art world. So obviously the mother is an artist, the son is an artist, the background is the museums, it's art school, it's curators, it's critics, it's collectors, just to steep the book in something that the reader can relate to. Well, going back to the girl in Cambodia, it struck me how important appearances are, and that we make instant snap judgments. So if, for example, if we go into a restaurant, or you go into a bank, or you go to work, your eyes are always jumping around and looking people, you're making snap judgments. Are they good looking? Are they not good looking? Are they groomed? What are their friends like? What's their job like? And we just automatically process that. I think it's particularly true today in the age of social media, when everybody puts a premium on appearances. And then you have a figure like Will Ryder, who has a contradiction. He's both visible and invisible. He's visible because of his disfigurement, yet after a first glance, you kind of look away and you think, well, thank goodness that's not me, or poor guy, I wonder what his life is like. So he becomes invisible. So you can imagine for him how difficult it is to express himself. And that's really what the book is all about, how he learns self-expression that goes far beyond physical appearance. Well, I think everything revolves a little bit from our own experience. I mean, I was no different than most adolescents. I felt my share of alienation and frustration and wondering where you are in the world. I think that the key lesson that you can take from adolescence is the lessons of self-discovery. And what's very critical in this book is how early self-discovery comes to Wilson. And there's a key scene early on in the book where he looks at his face literally for the first time at age 6 on his first day at school. Up to this point, he was burned in a fire at age 3. His father and his sister, being very protective, have taken all the mirrors from the house, and he's been convinced by his father not to worry about what his face looks like. It's not what counts, it's what's inside that counts. Yet when he goes to school and suddenly everybody is staring at him, and he realizes, my God, what is this? And he sneaks off to the bathroom and he goes and looks in the mirror, and he sees the crusty ears and the knob of a chin and a nose that's mottled and lips that are twisted and purplish. Instead of freaking out like other people are who look at him, he looks deep into the mirror and he imagines something. His imagination at this point has already been nurtured by his father and sister, and he imagines seeing somebody from another life, a magical passage of time, a different boy. And he wants to know, what is that boy like? What stories does he have to tell me? How do I relate to him? So right away, he's on his voyage of self-discovery. His adventures begin at that point. Well, I think it's substantially different in that, at least for me, when I start writing, as I said, I started with an image of Will Ryder. I had an idea of a family, a mother and father, coming out from New York City to New Mexico, which is autobiographical, and the cultural shock of leaving, say, Columbia University and going to a tiny town in southern New Mexico called Santo Tomas, and all that kind of adjustment. My writing process would be pretty deliberative. I think everybody who wants to be a writer should write at least a sentence a day. And if not, you give yourself a pass one day, then it's a week, then it's a month, and you never write the book at all. So I think that discipline is really important. And then I also believe in going over multiple drafts. And I believe in putting a book away in a drawer, picking it up, starting again. If it takes you 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, it's not as important as the final product. I think my fondness for the books that I read in college, going back, I guess, to Jack Kerouac and On the Road, or Joseph Heller and Catch-22, any number of Updike books, Joyce short stories, they've always stuck with me as my favorite books. What I'm reading now, I just finished George Saunders' The 10th of December, and I like that a lot because it takes America today, the same America that Updike and John Cheever took 50 years ago, and of course we're very different. A lot has to do with technology, computers, cell phones, social media, but the underlying structure of America, the neuroses that we feel, the conflicts that we feel, our insecurities, they're the same. And you have that one set of dynamics of the insecurities, and then you contrast that with, say, American optimism, and that you can do anything you want, and ambition, and you have this very fertile area of narrative content. Well, I'm working on a new book. It's been a long time in coming. I think maybe as you get older, you tend to go further back into your childhood because you're always reanalyzing what really happened to you, and you're writing yourself a new version. So I'm another family story that I'd like to put on paper. I'm very fond of what Tolstoy said. He said, I think it's happy families are all alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own individual way. And within that context of multitudes of unhappiness, there are, again, it's great narrative content. Well, T-Rex came on the page when Wilson is about 15 and leaving New Mexico for art school. So it's time for a romantic interlude. The narrative needed it, he needed it. And T-Rex is a character who is very much like Wilson. She's fragile but assertive. She's insecure but confident in other ways. She dresses differently, she acts differently. And when he meets her, and they decide to have coffee the first night, and they're just kind of getting to know each other, he's struck not only by her whimsy and her different kind of behavior, but she looks at his face and she says, "Wow, you got a great face. I love your face." And he's so taken aback because everybody has basically bullied him or rejected him, and here's somebody out of the blue that actually likes his face. Needless to say, he melts at that comment, but she means it. And he finds in her a very kindred spirit, and their relationship blooms from that moment on, and it goes on and off for the rest of the book. In terms of the mother, Susan Ryder, she is just the opposite of Wilson, certainly in terms of the type of painter she is. She is an abstract expressionist, she is highly cerebral, she is not known as a feeling person, and she is opaque in her emotions. So basically, you're not sure whether you like her or dislike her. What she does to her son seems inexcusable to a lot of people, yet in her own way, she does care about him. It's just that he has to decode what that is. So you have Wilson, who is a very emotional painter, just the opposite of her, and he's always colliding into her and her sensibility. And you never know as a reader where that's going to go and how that's going to end up. I think it's always one of the pleasant surprises of writing a book, as opposed to the pain and the compulsive aspects of it and the difficult problem solving. One of the pleasures are you end up creating characters that may be bigger than you had originally intended, and they surprise you and they grow on you. You tend to like them. So for the case of Wilson, who I wanted to be a willful, almost defiant person, I had great respect for him, more than I thought I would as he progressed. He ended up doing things that I didn't know I would want him to do, and he took on a life of his own, and I began to think I would really like to know in real life a person named Wilson Ryder, all that he'd been through and all that he overcomes. And the same, I guess, for Hannah, the sister, and the father, and the mother.